Welcome back, everybody. So a few weeks ago, I'm online and I stumble upon this thread discussing games being too big. And I took an interest in it because at the time, I was in the second half of Tales of Arise, and I was starting to feel like, yeah, you know what? This game is dragging on a little bit. Is this game too long? This topic, games are too big, you can break it down or interpret it four different ways. Games being too big in scale, which is what most people were talking about. Open world games, the new Zelda titles, they're just too big and too empty. And you've heard a lot of people's complaints about open worlds before. I will spend a little more time talking about games being too long. Some issues between long games and unnecessarily large games do overlap. Both of those also have their unique problems. Another thing you could talk about, and this was the old conversation on games being too big, was that games were simply too large in file size. 60 gigabytes, 100 gigabytes, whatever it was, they were starting to become a little out of control on our SSDs, or you guys who play a lot of console games, you might run into this with your PlayStations, for example. And then the fourth way that you could approach this topic, or a fourth complaint that you might have, is that because these games are just so big, their development times are too long, and we're waiting forever to get some games played here. We'll quickly address the point about development times by looking at the Tales series as an example. So between 2003 and 2009, 9 major titles were released, from Symphonia to Graces. Just 2 years later, people got Tales of Xillia, and only 1 year after that was its sequel, Xillia 2. Tales series is releasing a lot of games here, so they've got a lot to play in a short time frame. Then it would be a 3-year wait for people to play Zestiria in 2015. However, again, only 1 year later, people got to play its sequel, Berseria, in 2016. Then it would be a 5-year wait. People got to play Tales of Arise in 2021. Now, in the studio's defense, they did want the release to be in 2020, but they just needed more development time to have everything ready for the next generation of consoles. So, a 5-year wait for Tales of Arise. And there's a couple of questions here. Number one, is the wait worth it? That's up to you to decide. Depends on what you think of the quality of the game. Number two, is 5 years too long? And would you rather have a smaller game, a shorter game, whatever it may be, so that you could have a Tales series or a Tales entry released just a little bit earlier? And you can ask this question of any of your favorite series. Halo, now I don't think anyone's really waiting for a new Halo title, so sorry, that's a bad example. But Final Fantasy, how long do you want to wait for Final Fantasy VII? How long did people want to wait for Cyberpunk? Remember the constant teasing about that game, and then when it released, everyone said it was just a buggy mess, and it should have spent more time in development. Maybe it would have been the right decision had the studio delayed the game one more time, but since then, Cyberpunk has made an amazing recovery. I'll quickly return to the third point that I brought up earlier about games being too big in size. So 60 gigabytes, 100 gigabytes, how big, how gargantuan are these games getting? Now, I've run into issues on my own 1 terabyte SSD. Okay, it's not entirely for my Steam games. I have it partitioned out for some other things, but still, I've run into problems where I've had, let's just say, Warzone, Dota 2, Deep Rock Galactic, and a couple other multiplayer games installed. And I've got some single-player titles installed. Cyberpunk, Tales of Arise. I don't know which one I'm going to get to first, but I'll have them both ready to go for when the time arises. And then a bunch of indie games and smaller titles. And I've had to uninstall some to be able to play something that came up right away. That's a problem. It's not the end of the world. I think this point can segue into something that I'm not as well versed in, which is about the developers optimizing their games, or I should say the lack of optimization when it comes to making these games. So I'll leave that one there. If that's something that you want to elaborate on in the comment section, go ahead. I don't know too much about the development and the programming and the optimization of these games. So now we can move on to the meat of this video and address people's complaints about games being too big in scale or too long in duration. And I do have some notes and some reasons why those might be the case, but first I'd like to offer a counterpoint. Very simple. Even short games and small games can be boring or mundane. And it all comes down to the gameplay design and the choices that the developers make and whether they are engaging you or not. So I'm going to bring up an example here of a shorter game, Painkiller Black. I'm not throwing it under the bus, I've only just started playing it, and I'm having a good time with it. This is an old school FPS with fast movement, a few but very powerful weapons, and a lot of enemies. And the way that it works for progressing through the game is you'll get to a new area, a door in front of you will close and lock, and you cannot proceed until you've killed every enemy in the area. At least that's how it is so far. Again, I've just started playing this title. Now I'm not going to praise it, and I'm not going to criticize it. I'm just telling you that this is how it works. You cannot advance the game until you've killed every enemy that spawns. Well, if you're having a good time with the combat and you like the movement and you like the weapons, then that's not something you're going to mind. You're going to enjoy the gameplay. However, if you feel like there's not enough enemy variety or the weapons don't feel good, whatever your complaint is, obviously this can turn the game into a little bit of a slog. You would rather bypass a lot of the combat, focus maybe more on the exploration and finding secrets, but no, the game is forcing you to sit still. Well, not literally, but the game is forcing you to wait, kill all of these enemies before you can proceed. So it's really about the gameplay and the game mechanics and whether they were fun or not. Were you engaged or were you left bored or wanting? And I know it's not a revelatory statement, but this is something that I always come back to when I do these food for thought videos. It's all about the gameplay and whether you had fun. And I'm emphasizing this really obvious point as my counter to people who just make a blanket statement about games being too big. If you're familiar with the channel, then you know that I love Breath of the Wild, and I think that Tears of the Kingdom is one of the best games of all time. These are not simply open, boring spaces with nothing to do. I might be going on my main quest, following a path, and there's always something to see. And I might take a look to my right, spinning the camera around, and I see a clump of trees. I'm curious and I'm intrigued and I want to head over there and take a look around. Maybe there's some new ingredients, or maybe there's a treasure chest that's sunk to the bottom of a lake. I don't know until I go over there and I explore it. I don't think that simply exploring is its own reward. I feel like there has to be something there, but it can even be a really nice environment. Even in the older titles, whether they're 2D or 3D, you can ignore the main quest objectives. You can go off the beaten path, and there are excellent rewards for exploring, usually in the form of heart pieces. These are items that, as you collect them, they will increase your health bar. And so you are incentivized to spend a little bit more time with your boots on the ground. You can speed that up a little bit, cover more ground in a bigger map by riding a horse. Or, if you know where you're going, and you've already cleared that area out from point A to point B, you can circumvent that travel by doing a fast travel. And think about a game like Batman Arkham Origins. Played this last year or the year before. It was my first time playing one of these Batman titles, and I really enjoyed it. And you know what? When it came to traversal in that game, I probably chose to go on foot, or I should say through the air, with my grappling hook and gliding. I chose to do that more often than I picked a fast travel. And that's just because I enjoyed how it felt. It was fun swinging around the corners and going between buildings and just seeing if there were people fighting or having confrontations in little pockets of the city. All kinds of stuff that I would have completely ignored had I just chosen a fast travel on my map. And I'm sure a game like Spider-Man, I haven't played a recent one, but I'm sure that's another example of a game where you could have a big map. You could set it in a huge New York City, and you can make players enjoy that map because the movement is so much fun. Next thing I have written down, a couple of intangibles that can affect how long a game feels, and they are the storytelling and the pacing. Now, of course, the story can be written to be short or long, and that's going to be the main backbone of the length of the game. But in a game with a longer story, I don't mind spending 40, 50, or 60 hours playing that game as long as the storytelling is done well. What's in the first half of the game? What are we building up here? What are you introducing to get me invested? And then in the second half of the game, what are we working towards? What's the payoff going to be for the characters? And all throughout, how's the combat? What are you putting in between? Are you giving us boring combat when there's a really good story moment and I just want to reveal what that next detail is? I don't want to be going through a long dungeon right now. I want to find out what happens to a certain character. So again, just keeping it vague, but that's another one like the gameplay. Is it fun or is it not? Is the story told well or is it not? And the last things that I've written down for this section are like the unsung heroes of game mechanics. When they're done well, I don't think anyone really talks about them. But when they're done poorly, everybody complains and they say that, oh, that game's unplayable. I'm talking about the camera, field of view, your perspective when you play the game. And when I gave the early example of running through Hyrule and Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, how your camera's positioned and where you're swinging your camera around, how much you can see on the screen, obviously affects how you're going to be interacting with the world. Are you going to see something in the corner of your screen that catches your attention and sparks your curiosity? What about in an RTS? You can only see so much of the screen at a time, only see so much of your base. And so it directly impacts your gameplay, and it creates this frantic and frenetic experience when you're under attack or when you're sieging. Multitasking is being able to jump to different points of the map with a limited camera view. If you had a bird's eye view and you could see everything, well, you could just drag your mouse, drag a box around all of your units and click them to attack this thing. And it's just a few millimeters over this way, or a few centimeters. Drag another box around your units. So having the camera set to a specific level of zoom really makes the games more fun. And field of view, that creates a personalized experience, because so many games now you can adjust your field of view when you're playing first person. So would you have a better time if your field of view is set at 90 as opposed to 70? I've just got this default now where I go into a game, and if I can adjust it, I make it 90. Something that I adopted from Minecraft, and I just apply it to everything else. We're going to wrap up by going over some examples for game mechanics from various RPGs that I feel like when they're done well, they help keep the experience fresh. And I gave the example of the reward system from our adventure games. So what about an RPG? The EXP bar. Now, obviously, you need a good EXP growth. If you're only advancing like this for every monster that you kill, boy, does that get boring. Too monotonous. You're not going to want to be grinding. But what if you get a nice chunk of EXP and your bar is about 80% full, you're about to level up? That's the kind of thing where if I see that I'm close to leveling up, it's only going to be 5 minutes of grinding, I will happily spend those 5 minutes because maybe I'll get a new skill. Speaking of skills and abilities, this also has to do with action games, so RPGs and action games. Being able to constantly level up and get new abilities. And how are those designed? I don't necessarily get that much of a kick when I see like, oh, my stats increase a little bit. Oh, it's plus 1% to an ability that I've been using. No, give me a new effect. Make it so that when I punch an enemy, I'm also going to daze him or have a chance to concuss him, and he's not going to be able to get up for 10 seconds. Don't just make my punch a little bit stronger. Make it interesting. In RPGs also, party members. I love getting new party members, but don't give them all to me in the first half of the game. I'm trying to think, did a game like Dragon Age Origins do this? Another one that comes to mind is Tales of Vesperia. Now, I haven't played this in over a decade, but I'm pretty sure the last character to join your party is clearly in the second half of the game. And what about puzzle games? Having new puzzle mechanics introduced to you. A game like Box Boy for the 3DS is a great example of this, because as you go to different worlds, you're constantly playing with new puzzle mechanics. And that's it. Finally, I've talked enough, and I haven't shown that much gameplay footage, I know, but it's a discussion video, and I want to hear from you now about the things that I've mentioned, the various gameplay mechanics, games being too long or too big, maybe too short or too small. Maybe there is an example of a long game, like 60 hours, 80 hours long, that had you fully invested from beginning to end. And you know, with games that are too big, I feel like they can almost always be filled in properly. You can almost always come up with something to make it fun. But I do think games can be too long even when they're good, because sometimes I just want to move on to something else in my backlog. Or sometimes I wake up after 2 months of playing the same game and I'm going, oh my God, I got a video coming up, or there's these other things to do, or my friends are moving on to some other games and I've been stuck on this one for so long. It's like, yeah, I'm having a good time, but maybe it's time to try something else also. Anyway, so that's it. Thank you everybody for watching. I'm looking forward to what you're going to say in the comments section. We'll have a conversation there, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.